Good morning. Welcome to our first one of these remote sessions. Hopefully soon I'll be doing some live lessons, but until then, we're going to be watching these YouTube videos and completing the work on assignments. So please make sure that you've got your assignment open, ready to write some information into. And as we go through the tasks, they link to the assignments and you just write the answers in. You write the answers in directly onto the document, and then at the end of the lesson you need to make sure you submit it to me so I can take a look at what you've done. So the first thing we're looking at today, we are looking at Vietnam. Before we finish we were looking at Korea, but now we're moving on to Vietnam, and we're going to start with kind of the origins of or where Vietnam was at the end of the Second World War. So before we get on to that, I'd like you to write down or go into your assignment and complete these list of keywords. As we go through this video, you can pause it, and I'll tell you to pause it at different points. It's also important that if you don't have assignments yet, if you're not on assignments yet, that you're writing this down on a piece of paper and you're getting the work complete. So if you don't have assignments, then please make sure you're using a pen and paper to complete this task. So your keywords are communism, Red Scare, domino theory, containment, General MacArthur, 38th parallel, Seoul, and King Il Sung. So pause the video here for about 5 minutes to complete those keywords for me. Okay, so well done. Got some definitions. Please make sure you put these definitions into your assignments or you're writing them down on your piece of paper. So communism is a system in which all property and industry is owned by the community and it's all kind of operated by the government. The Red Scare is the fear of communism. The domino theory is an American theory that communism, once dominant in one country, will pass to another, falling like dominoes, each one after the other. Containment is the American theory that communism must be stopped from spreading. And General MacArthur, he was the US general in charge of the United Nations forces in Korea, and he was fired for being too aggressive and threatening to use nuclear weapons. The 38th parallel is the border separating North and South Korea. Seoul is the capital of South Korea, and Kim Il Sung is the leader of North Korea. Okay, so please make sure you pause the video there if you need to complete those keywords. I'll come back to me in a second. Okay, so that is our keywords, and we're going to use them later in our lesson. But we're going to look at the kind of the history of Vietnam, especially its occupation by the French. So we're going to read through all of these bullet points, and you need to use the sentences that I've created in your assignment, and you're quite literally just finishing the sentences for me, filling in the blanks. So you can either read and pause the video here, or you can listen to me read them out as you're completing your assignments. It's completely up to you. So Vietnam, or formerly Indochina, has been a French colony for 80 years until it was captured by the Japanese during World War II. So the French have been controlling Vietnam for a long time. However, during World War II, it was taken by the Japanese. The Japanese ruled the area savagely, and a strong anti-Japanese movement began to emerge under communist leader Ho Chi Minh, and that group was called the Viet Minh. So a group led by Ho Chi Minh started to fight against the Japanese. Ho Chi Minh encouraged his people to fight for independence, and by the end of World War II, the Viet Minh controlled the north of the country. So after a huge amount of fighting, the Viet Minh actually took back control of the north. They were determined to control the whole country, so in 1945 they entered the city of Hanoi and declared Vietnamese independence. The French, though, having finished the Second World War and won the Second World War against both the Japanese and the Nazis, wanted to rule Vietnam. And they wanted Ho Chi Minh to relinquish the power, which he refused to. So actually, following the Second World War, the French then went to war in Vietnam against the Viet Minh for 9 years. Ho was supported by Mao Zedong in China after he came to power in 1949, and the French were supported by the Americans, who poured $500 million a year into the French war effort. They wanted to make sure that Vietnam stayed a capitalist country. In 1954, 8,000 French troops were killed at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, one of the worst military losses the French had suffered. and this was in addition to 73,000 who had already been killed during the previous decade during the Second World War. So France had no choice, that the public would no longer support any war effort on their part, so they were forced to surrender. And what it showed was that Vietnam was an impressive uh, international power that could defend itself. So pause the video here for 5 minutes and complete those sentences for me. Okay, so next I need you to click the link on your assignments, or it's going to be in the description of this video here. And I'd like you to watch the video. It's about 13 minutes long, and as you watch it, I'd like you to make notes about the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. I will see you once you finish the video. Okay, so you can tell in that video how embarrassing this defeat was for the French. So the French are embarrassed, but Geneva and the United Nations are still going to get involved, and they're still going to try and get themselves involved in this international dispute. So in May 1954, Britain, France, China, and the USSR, the USA, and Vietnam all met in Geneva to decide the future of Vietnam. So they all sat down together and they tried to come up with a solution for what the problem is. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about what each country would want to achieve at the Geneva Convention in 1954. So pause the video here. In your assignments, you'll see that each country, I want you to write a statement about each country. So let's pause the video there, and I'll see you in about 5 minutes. So the British didn't want the spread of communism, neither did the French, but the French also wanted to take back land that they controlled before. The Chinese wanted to support North Vietnam and the communist Ho Chi Minh. The USSR would want the same thing, to support the communist Ho Chi Minh. The USA would want to stop the spread of communism further, so therefore would want to support a capitalist Vietnam. And Vietnam wanted to be unified, it wanted to come together. But there was an internal split. The northern side wanted Ho Chi Minh, and the southern side wanted to continue its relationship with America. So let's see what actually happened. And in the box, or underneath your predictions about what each country would want, I just want you to briefly describe what happened at Geneva. So the key points: the French agreed to leave. The French agreed to withdraw themselves from Vietnam. There was also a ceasefire, so both sides agreed that they weren't going to fight each other anymore. They weren't going to shoot at each other anymore. Vietnam became an independent nation, formally ending 75 years of French colonialism. However, it wasn't one country yet. Vietnam was split into a northern side, a communist, and a southern non-communist side along the 17th parallel. So not the 38th parallel like Korea, but along the 17th parallel. But it was intended to be temporary until the elections could be held in 1956, which would allow the Vietnamese people to choose their own governments. However, as we know with Korea, that election was never able to take place. Instead, the two sides were separated and their leaders kept them separated. And we're going to look at those leaders in a second. It's also important to note that Laos and Cambodia were formed, both countries that used to be part of Indochina, but both countries were now susceptible to different influences like communism and capitalism. So let's just have a quick look at French Indochina there then. So French Indochina is split into 4 different countries now. So we've got North Vietnam over here, we've got South Vietnam running down here, we have Cambodia over here, and Laos up here. The interesting thing about Vietnam is quite simply its geography. If you look, the section, the 17th parallel which runs along here, is a very thin border. And there's a huge population at the top of North Vietnam, and there's quite a large population in the south. So there's 2 kind of large populations that are separated by a very small a very small section of a border. Okay. So let's have a look at the 2 leaders then. We're going to look at Diem, and then we're going to look at Ho Chi Minh in a bit more detail. So your task is to read through the information and to just write 2 sentences summarising Dinh Diem. So in 1954, a non-communist government was set up under President Dinh Diem. He was corrupt, he was harsh, and he was incredibly unpopular. He was a Catholic in a largely Buddhist country, and he treated the Buddhists very poorly, especially seeing as they were the majority. He refused to give them religious freedoms, and in a mark of protest, they would often set themselves on fire. This is referred to as self-immolation. And self-immolation is where you burn yourself for your religion or for a protest, a particular cause. So Diem was not the leader that the people wanted, but he was put in power by the Americans. He supported the Americans, so as long as he kept the country capitalist, the Americans were more than happy to support a man who was actually causing a lot of issues within the country. The impact then is that large sections of the population in South Vietnam, although forced to have a capitalist leader, were not very happy with him. So I just want you to pause the video here for 3 minutes, and I want you to write down and complete the profile of Diem. So we talked about self-immolation, and I really want to show you, it's one of the most famous pictures taken. Please just, if you don't want to look at it, just skip about 10 seconds into the future. But the video is a very iconic picture. It is of a monk who has set himself on fire in a form of protest. He is sat in a meditative state, he's had petrol poured over him, and when the torch is lit, he stays in a state of trance. And people watch and see him give himself up for his religion. This was shared around the world, and it's still one of the most iconic pictures to date. Let's have a look at Ho Chi Minh then. So again, I want you to read through the information. I want you to write a 2-sentence profile on Ho Chi Minh. So we already know that Ho Chi Minh was a freedom fighter against the Japanese, and he was fighting with the Viet Minh. He was a popular leader, and his main aim was to reunite Vietnam. He wanted it to be one country, but he wanted it to be under his ideology. If there had been national elections in 1956, he probably would have won, even in the South, because the South hated Diem so much. However, those elections were not allowed to happen. In 1960, the National Liberation Front was formed with the aim of uniting the country. Diem reacted with anger, calling its members the Viet Cong, or the Vietnamese Communists. This is where we get the word Viet Cong from, and we're going to be looking at who the Viet Cong were next lesson. The National Liberation Front started a guerrilla warfare campaign to try to remove Diem. So guerrilla warfare is not engaging in open battle, but attacking your enemy when they're least expected. So it's coming out of the bushes and scaring them and causing them problems. So attacking when they're retreating, and whenever they attack you front on, you're retreating yourself. So by 1961, there were 20,000 Viet Cong guerrillas in South Vietnam, but they needed to defeat Diem's allies as well as the Viet Minh. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to complete that 2-sentence profile before we move on to our final task. So pause the video for 2 minutes and get your task completed. Okay, so let's go on to our final task. So the final task is an 8-mark question, and I'm expecting you to write 2 paragraphs. The question is, explain why Vietnam was divided in two. You can see that I've given you sentence starters there. This is a 10-minute question, so you need to spend 10 minutes completing this question, and you must write 2 paragraphs. So Vietnam was divided in two as a result of the Geneva Agreement. At the Geneva Agreement, tell me what happened. Tell me why it's important. This was important because Vietnam remained divided because of its leaders. The South was controlled by, tell me who was supported by, what country supported them. And the North was controlled by who supported them. And finally, this caused a division because. So 10 minutes, I'll see you at the end of 10 minutes. Give it a go. All right, thank you so much for your hard work today. It's really good that we managed to get a full lesson completed. Please make sure you submit your assignments before you finish and turn them in to me. and then I will return them to you once I've had a chance to have a look. Thank you again. I'll see you later on in the week.